What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Corbin. Before we get into anything today, I do want to let you know that on Tuesday this week, we are going to be streaming at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time instead of our usual Wednesday schedule. The reason for this is one, Wednesday's games at 2:10 p.m., but two, because the trade deadline ends Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and so that stream should be a ton of fun. We're going to hop on at 7:30 Eastern Time, about 40 minutes before the game, really talk about all the trades that went down, all the trades that the Red Sox made. So if you haven't been to a live stream yet, this is the one to go to. It should be a ton of fun, and I hope to see you guys there. Again, that is Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Anyways, this last week for the Red Sox, it really didn't go according to plan. They lost 2 out of 3 games to the Milwaukee Brewers, and to be totally honest with you, I think we can all agree that this last month for the Red Sox has not gone to plan. And that's really important because this last month, especially this last week, has really been a determining factor as to whether or not the Red Sox will be buyers or sellers at the deadline. So what we're going to talk about today is whether or not this series truly sealed the Red Sox fate into being sellers at the deadline. We're going to talk about everything that happened in this series and why it relates to the Red Sox plan of attack here. And we're going to talk about whether or not they truly are sellers now, or if there's a chance that this team isn't a full seller at the deadline, because believe it or not, this team may not be. But before we get into that, do me a favor, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys are hitting the like button on this video, as it helps it out a ton. It would mean a lot to me. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. Let's get into it. Let's start with what happened in this series and how it pertains to the Red Sox approach to the deadline. The Red Sox didn't have too many great offensive games in this series. In fact, the last game of the series is really the only one I really want to make note of. We'll mention some other stuff that happened in the other games, but this last game in the series where the Red Sox beat the Brewers 7-2 was truly the first time I think that we have seen the legitimate Red Sox in a long time. I mean, they truly doubled the Brewers to death. And in what could have been the last game at Fenway Park for one of our best stars of the last couple of years, JD Martinez went off. And by went off, I mean literally every ball he touched was absolutely smoked. He had 2 doubles in this game along with an RBI. Xander Bogaerts actually had a really great series in general. He hit about 300 with a couple of walks, a couple of doubles, and a couple of RBIs to go along with it. Alex Verdugo had a nice little series himself. He hit 333 with, you guessed it, a couple of doubles. Vasquez continues his role. And the guy I want to talk about too is Christian Arroyo, who came back in the second game of this series and had a fantastic time coming back to this Red Sox team. He went 5 for 6 in 2 games with a couple of singles, a triple, a double, and a couple of walks. So as much as everyone was crapping on Arroyo for the beginning of the year, and as much as we really needed to see that production kick up, it seems like hopefully if he can stay healthy, that production is back to where it should be when we have Arroyo in the lineup. And all in all, I would say, especially the last game of the series, like I said in the beginning, it felt like a legitimate Red Sox game again. We weren't sitting there hoping for this Red Sox offense to get going. Every time there was a man on base, I didn't feel like they were going to flounder the opportunity to get him in. It felt like this Red Sox team was actually hitting the way that we know they could. The pitching, however, wasn't exactly fantastic in this series. Nick Pivetta probably had the worst start out of all the 3 starters in this series. He only went 5, gave up 4, and only struck out 4 as well. Brian Baio, who wasn't really the starter in game 2, but he pitched the most innings, so I'm going to consider him a starter. Austin Davis did fantastic, by the way. He's a great opener. But anyways, Brian Baio had his best outing as a member of the Boston Red Sox. He went 4 1/3 innings, striking out 4 and only allowing 2. This was by far and away the most poised that he has looked in his time with the Red Sox. So for him to have this great of an outing so early on in his career, only 4 games into his career, this is a really great sign, and I'm really excited to watch Baio develop in this Red Sox organization. Probably not with the Red Sox team the rest of the year, but it is fantastic to see. As for the last game, Josh Winkowski saved the Red Sox from having their first winless month by a starting pitcher since I think it was like the 40s or something. It's been a long time. He ended up getting the win in the last day of July, thank God. He went 5 innings, only allowed 2 as well. As for the bullpen story kind of remains the same, which is one of the problems that we're going to talk about in a second. We had Sawamura, who gave up 3 runs in his 2 outings. You had Brazier, who gave up 2 runs. Diekman hit a couple of guys, I think. He gave up a run. So yeah, same old song and dance there. Houck, Whitlock, Schreiber, those guys continue to be great in their roles as well. So it's quite literally the exact same scenario that we've been talking about all year. Regardless of whether or not the Red Sox are buyers or sellers at the deadline, it probably would be a good idea to get a guy in this bullpen that is at least one more reliable guy, right? A guy who hopefully has a couple more years of control that can help this team out for a couple more years to come. But at the very least, just to get someone in there, some fresh arms. It is kind of brutal to watch watch at this point, having Salmore, Brazier, and Diekman come out of there. So with all this losing that the Red Sox did in this last week, in this last series, especially in the last couple of weeks where they have lost in very embarrassing fashion, it's extremely easy to just assume that the Red Sox should and will be sellers at the deadline, but that might not entirely be true. Even with all of the carnage that the Red Sox have caused in the last couple of weeks, right? With injuries, with the way they've been losing, with the errors on the field, the Red Sox are still only one series sweep away from being a half game out of a playoff spot. Think about that for a second, right? We had one of the most historically bad series losses in baseball history, not just Red Sox history. We've had one of the worst months of baseball in Red Sox history, and yet this Red Sox team is still only a couple games out of a wild card spot, 3.5 to be exact. Now, this makes the question of whether or not the Red Sox are buyers or sellers at the deadline more complicated. I know we have talked about this a lot, right? On this channel, we have talked about the deadline a ton, but that's because it feels like every single game, the scenario with this team changes. We actually heard from some of the players who are definitely on the chopping block for the Boston Red Sox. Christian Vasquez was talked to after the game, and he said to the media that he doesn't know if Chaim Bloom believes in this team, that he wants to stay together as a group, and he wants Chaim to add players to improve this team, but he doesn't know if that's Chaim Bloom's thought process. When I say Chaim Bloom, I really mean the front office. As for JD Martinez, he came out after the game as well, and it almost felt like JD Martinez was saying goodbye. Now, these players probably know a lot more about what's going on behind the scenes than we do. You have to imagine they're at least somewhat transparent with these players as to whether or not they are going to be on the team after the deadline. And when JD Martinez was asked about, some of the way he feels about Fenway and the way he feels about the Sox fan and being here, he talked a lot in pretenses, like that he had already done it, that his time here was already over. He came out after the game, he signed autographs, he wore his hat during the post-game interview, and when asked about it, he said it's because he wants the Red Sox fans to know that this means memories. He talked about a lot of stuff as if he's already gone, and so that in my mind makes it kind of hard to believe that the Red Sox are going to be buyers at the deadline. But at the same time too, there is that middle ground that we have been talking about. There is a possibility that the Red Sox decide that they're going to bring in some pieces, they're going to try and go out and get some controllable, legitimate pieces that can help this team win, while also trying to give away some of their guys that may or may not be included in the Red Sox team in 2023. Those are guys that we've made videos on: Evaldi, JD, Vasquez. There's a bunch of different guys: Waka, Strom, Diekman, right? All these guys that are on a one-year deal that may or may not be on the team next year, the Red Sox could be letting go of. But at the same time, they could be letting go of those guys to get controllable MLB ready pieces as well. So in my mind, there is some middle ground to make up here. I'm not entirely sure that only being 3.5 games back of a wild card spot, regardless of how you've been playing lately, puts you into the sell everything, fire sale category. A lot of MLB executives are kind of saying the same thing. They have no idea where the Red Sox are going to go today or tomorrow. Everyone has a different opinion as to what the Red Sox should do, and to be honest with you, no one knows what's going on, and really neither do I. We've literally been talking about the deadline on this channel for what feels like weeks, right? And it feels so good that today and tomorrow we are finally going to get an answer to all of the speculation. There aren't going to be any more videos about who should be traded, who should be signed, all this stuff for a little bit, because we're going to know the answer to that question. We're going to hopefully have an idea as to whether or not Red Sox front office believes in this team, or whether or not the Red Sox front office has a plan for this team, because in my opinion, that's more important at this point. With everything that has gone on in the last month, to have a plan for what is going to happen in the future, not just the last 3 months or 2 months of the season, but the future of this franchise is extremely important. I think that needs to be addressed in both this deadline and the off season. But again, I guess we'll see. So this is going to be my last video on possibilities of the trade deadline. Obviously, we're going to cover everything that happens during the deadline, but I want you guys to let me know one more time. After everything you saw, we are officially at the deadline with this team. What do you do? Are you both a buyer or a seller? Are you a seller? Are you a buyer? What are your thoughts on the deadline after everything we've seen from this team in the last month? As always, if you've made it to the end of this video, do me a favor. Make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. It helps out a ton and would mean a lot to me. And if you could do me a huge favor, share with a friend or family member who loves the Red Sox as much as you do. Let me know what they think the Red Sox should do at the deadline. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the red seats.